Great. So I'd like to call the meeting of U46 back to order, reconvene the meeting of the U46 School Board. Before I go any further, are there any changes to the agenda that people want to make? Hearing none, I have none to suggest. Visitors and staff to be heard? Seeing none, move on. First up is the consent agenda. So we have the consent agenda currently has the approval of the warrants, approval of the meeting minutes of May 16th, the principals' reports that were submitted ahead of time, recommendations for professional appointments. Added to that are the ones that came in from Ben today. So we have a request to be relieved of contract, and we have two additional professional appointments. We have the tax anticipation note bid approval. And after the consent agenda, probably should note who it was awarded to and the information that's set up in there. And then the traffic flow repaving bid and a request for activity support. Would anyone like anything removed from the consent agenda? Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent. Seeing none, can I have a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented? Second? All those in favor of the consent agenda indicate by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Passes unanimously. Proficiency-based learning update. Rob, Amy, I'm going to hand this over to you.
Okay. So, from a summary position, we had 2 community engagement opportunities which provided information and feedback in regards to the modifications in the report card for the next school year, and they occurred May 11th and May 25th. May 25th was also, I thought, well attended, produced some good feedback, took back to the administration, the EHS administration team. Also, since the 25th, had the opportunity to have class meetings with the current freshmen and current sophomores in regards to the report cards. The current juniors, next year seniors, we will get the first week of school when we return, as we ran into the end of the year and the need for students to seek teachers out during flex block opportunities rather than a class meeting. So there's that piece in terms of the community. I can touch on that in just a bit, but in terms of what's going on inside the schoolhouse, we have continued to work with teachers with the goal of having course proficiencies completed by June 14th for all courses, since that's going to be step 1 for next year in terms of determining a student's success and growth in terms of the proficiencies identified in the course. In each course, on paper, we'll have between 5 and 15. They will submit, as I said, June 14th. Administration will provide feedback so that teachers will then use that feedback to tweak and refine proficiencies if needed, but more importantly, to take the feedback and use that in course descriptions, course expectation forms, which go to students and parents, and the goal being to have more agreement with teachers that have multiple sections of the same course in terms of how students can show growth and development in terms of the particular course. Certainly teachers that are teaching singletons, or they're the only teacher that teaches that section, there's a little more less room for discussion since they're the only one, but nonetheless they're going to still be submitting the course proficiency document. And next year, as you are aware, we're going to be pulling out 2 learning habits, the work expectations and engagement. And conversations, of course, continue and will continue over the next few years on a couple of fronts in terms of the reporting. One would be the other variables that influence a grade, how we can tighten up and reach consistency on approach to things like partial credit or whole credit only, dropping the lowest test or quiz grade or not, extra credit or not, and other things like that. The other conversation piece, which, having come back from Gusky and Concord in May 20th, we're staying with the current numerical system, but in terms of 0 to 100, but the bigger question moving forward is, as we tweak and refine learning habits, do we want to also look at a much smaller scale of assessment so that calibration will be more accurate and consistent amongst teachers? And as Dr. Gusky says, do we really need 69 points of failure on a scale of growth or lack thereof, and 31 points of what's determining success? So I think that's the next big bite to chew as we move through the slide. As you may remember, the 3 to 5 year rollout, but that's another upcoming topic of conversation as we move forward. In terms of feedback from Brian, I believe you were there. Liz, were you there? Yes, yes. The May 25th. So I thought the participation and turnout was solid. I would say combining feedback from the 11th and the 25th, there were a few folks that were, this is I'd say more on the 11th, were looking to see a little bit more than what we proposed. And then at the same time, we also had some folks that were very pleased that we were taking it slow and not looking to turn everything over in a 1 to 2 year period. So, and everything else in between. I mean, there was everything else in between in terms of feedback that I received, whether it was in person or email. So, I mean, more to come. I thought they were very positive nights. I enjoyed it. I thought the energy was good. That's not to say everybody was in agreement, but I think the energy was good, positive. So, Amy, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Just that we collected, handwritten feedback, and some folks followed up with email, so we're in the process of looking through those. We had 6 advisories participate in small group feedback with students so that we could collect more sort of individual student feedback outside of the class meetings. So we need to meet with faculty to go over the results of that feedback, and it did, as Rob said, it ran quite the range in terms of both evenings. We have the opportunity to work with, not the opportunity, we are going to be signing a contract with Great Schools Partnership for a 50-day contract. They're going to support not only Essex High School but the district in terms of its work in proficiency. So we've added some days. Our coach that's been assigned to us is Reed Dyer, who's already come out and worked with us. He's going to come out on the 13th and the 14th as well. And he's made quite an impression with our faculty and our teacher leaders, and very thoughtful leader. We've had monthly meetings with him via video chat as well. And he's supporting the leadership team around the structures that are in place, the communication, and the faculty learning that needs to be there. He's supporting our teacher leader, Colleen Berner, around proficiency-based graduation and what it looks like to support the faculty learning. And what we're going to do is have him work with, next year, Essex Town and Chittenden Central will be co-facilitating curriculum meetings. And we're going to begin together, and then Ellen and I will kind of split some lead facilitation. She'll take the lead K-5 and I'll take the lead 6 through 12, and we're going to have Reed participate in that work with us so that the work that we've done up here at the high school around content area proficiencies will move to a 6 through 12 and then in a K through 12, and he'll be able to help us keep those connections.
I guess one other thing I would add while I'm thinking of it is at the August meeting, I'll provide all board members with the 3 dates, one at the end of October, one at the end of January, and 2 days in March, in terms of traveling to Norwood and participating, because board members are certainly welcome, and I would encourage attendance at one of these opportunities so that you really get the chance, like we all do, to see what's going on, not only throughout Vermont, but throughout New England. And there are other board members that attend those meetings as well, so it's an opportunity to network, and I realize you're all busy people too, but I want to give you the information early so you can, if you want to go, you can make it happen. It's a very positive experience.
Colleen pitched the idea of, we don't quite have a name for it yet, but some sort of steering committee that would help us look at proficiency-based graduation requirements and PLPs and find ways to kind of keep them connected. And the good news is, and I don't know how much of it is the topic and how much of it is just Colleen's, infectious sort of personality, but I think she had 21 takers overnight without any questions about what the meetings were. So we have a number of people who want to step up beyond our current teacher leadership model to be able to support this work. So we're looking at ways to try to support the number of people. We're looking at ways to include students in the steering committee and keep that middle school, high school connection going. to help support the 3 middle schools who now I think have an opportunity to have a closer conversation around their standards-based reporting. And there's an opportunity in the summer. I don't know if we're going to, if we'll have enough time to convince takers to give up a couple days in July, but there's an opportunity that Great Schools Park, or I should say, New England Secondary is hosting it. The League of Innovative Schools.
But what's exciting about that is the focus this summer is how instructional practices change in the classroom as a result of moving towards, and that's very big.
So we're looking at the idea of maybe setting a team to that if we can get
Yep.
some takers.
Yep. And the beauty with what Amy said is the group of 20, I think it's 21 teachers that have stepped forward to show an enthusiasm to move this work forward is across all content areas. So that's what's really encouraging. It's not just one department or one area, it's spread out. So that's good news.
And I think, the conversation we've had regionally, the curriculum directors met recently around what each of the schools are doing, and we continue to be concerned with the idea of reciprocity. It's something that Bob cares an awful lot about in terms of students who are coming to the tech center, but also students who move from school to school as it happens. And so that's one of the bodies of work we want to take on this summer, is begin to look like what could reciprocity look like, because as our state set up a framework, but not necessarily sort of mandates of particular steps, it means schools are moving in different times and places. And that makes me uncomfortable.
Well, having heard the presentation from the principals group, not an association, from Chittenden County, it's all good, it's all interesting, but they're all skinning the cat differently.
Yep.
The one common thing that Rob just mentioned was that it really gets to proficiency-based instruction.
Yep.
The process for evaluating and collecting the data can follow, but the real work is in the classrooms. Want to also say thanks to Rob and Colleen Berner and Pat Burke and a principal from Maine. They're presenting at the Vermont Association of Career and Tech Ed Directors Summer Conference, which is all of the directors from those 3 states, Maine, Vermont, and New Hampshire, on proficiency-based graduation requirements and other school initiatives that kind of cross over into tech centers. Because tech centers really are just sitting back right now, knowing that this is out there, but not knowing how to respond.
Which is ironic, because I find that the tech center really has a pretty good handle on proficiency-based learning.
I think there's a lot we can learn about it. I think we're still probably in the realm of standards-based or project-based, but the real, and I think you're right, I think in terms of the technical training we do, yeah, absolutely. In terms of the academic instruction that we do, embedded within the programs and our standalone academic classes, that's where the reciprocity has to start being discussed. But that challenge has existed forever. Algebra 1 from one school compared to another is different.
Yeah.
So no shortage of work.
That's for sure.
Erin, did you have any questions, or Kathy?
Well, one with the proposed advisory group that Colleen is pulling together, have you thought about adding a parent? You said students, which makes me feel good, and
We haven't.
I just-
This was a new idea that was pitched,
Okay.
so I'll, bring that to them. I don't know that they'd necessarily be opposed to it. The question would be sort of
Right.
around that. And this was a kind of a
Yeah,
good
I don't think
idea.
there'd be any opposition to that.
Yeah.
It's just the
Yeah.
I mean-
logistics of it all.
Sure.
I think it's a great idea.
And I'm thinking in terms of understanding and sharing out and
Yes.
communicating
Oh, yeah, no,
that confusion, yeah.
I appreciate having friends in the bread aisle.
Absolutely.
One thing I would say about parent involvement is that the Nellie May work, which is under all of this, is happening at the same time, and but that is very parent focused. That group, that planning team that's being developed, and the invitation was extended at the night on the 25th and at the 11th, and there is a lot of interest in that group. I would love to see some students in that group. But I think that, and this is just a heads up, in October, there'll be a meeting for 4 weeks, once a week for 4 weeks. It's a 12-hour commitment for parents and students and anyone else who'd be interested in really diving into the to the engagement piece and really really picking apart what is it that our community wants to know about. Where do we say, okay, that's an admin thing and that's not something we need to put a lot of energy into, and what is it that we can recognize as things that our community, our families, and our students really want to know about. So there, I feel good about the opportunity for involvement in the fall around some of
Great.
these issues.
I had a chance to attend the 25th. I thought it was engaging. I thought it was interesting. I liked the format myself. I think that that to have the topic well prepped is to talk about why do we grade first, because I think it sets a scene without that kind of that proposal or that assumption of we're changing something we've already bought into, because I think when you start to wonder about why do we grade and what is the purpose of it, you begin to look at the change really much more transformationally than just kind of on the surface of it. So the work is that proficiency per course kind of thing, and you talked about some inter-subject course calibration that's going to be happening. But all that's going to hinge upon the quality of alignment of the assessments to reporting on the achievement of the rubric.
That's one of the questions I'll be asking the CCLs when we meet this Wednesday, is do all your assessments reflect the proficiencies that have been articulated?
And are they scaffolded in
Yes.
such to show the, proficiency is presumably something that is built to then achieve. So are the assessments doing that?
And are there multiple opportunities for students to demonstrate
Yeah.
that they can?
Because at a
become
20,000-foot view,
Yeah.
sometimes things do look the same, but when they go right down into that classroom on a daily basis is when you start to see those kinds of this is extra credit, this isn't, this
Right.
is required, this isn't.
Right.
So up on top, it's yep, we got the same subject and we've got the same schedule and we meet for the same number of Carnegie hours, but as you start to go down, and that's really where assessments are.
Mhm.
Right.
What do I count?
Mhm.
And whether something is required to be 10 pages in order to show proficiency, or does it need to be 5 pages, or does the length not matter at all, and it's really just the showing of proficiency.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, and I think that that some of the feedback that I've received is that hearing Colleen especially stand up and say it's a work in progress is really much more comforting to the community than to say, here's what we're doing. So I got a lot of feedback around that piece, and a question around, which I talked to you about, the compliance issue of 2020 or 2021. So just for clarity, it's a 2021 compliance, is that right? For proficiency-based grading, graduation requirements, is it 2020 or 2021?
Do you mean the state
The
requirement?
graduation
Right.
class?
Oh, okay. So Vermont Education Quality Standards require that we put something in place beginning 2016. What that looks like for that graduating class, so our first step was proficiency through courses.
Right.
Other schools may be doing proficiencies through the school-wide lens. I know that CVU they picked up on this, began with transferable skills.
Right.
So it's not so much this class by 2020, it's that you have something in place by 2016.
Something in place.
Yeah.
that reflects
Which
proficiency-based.
ends up being 2020,
Right.
but the transferable
the
skills have
trans-
been delayed
To the
for a
following
year
year.
to
So
2021.
just those transferable skills are what has been delayed by the state.
It's not so much delayed by the state. We're required to implement this. We needed to have an element in place by 2016, and we
An
made
element.
the decision after working with all the CCLs that
Right.
all of that was too much at once. So we're keeping our graduation requirements. In order to graduate, you take X number of courses. Those courses will have proficiencies, meets the letter of
Gotcha.
the law,
Yep.
and impacts the most number of teachers and students in this building at once,
Yep.
and changes classroom instruction first, and gets at the assessment piece. Transferable skills, one of the reasons we held off was, first, that was a big body of work.
Right.
And the second was the state slowed down its development of the backup material. So we know what those transferable skills are, but they haven't finished writing the rubrics for them
Right.
yet. So we
Okay.
thought, why come out of the gate implement something for a ninth grade class that would then have to change the following year.
Okay.
And all
That makes
schools,
sense.
well, in Chittenden County anyways, have agreed with the transferable skills that the state has proposed. And for the function of moving around from school to school, why reinvent the wheel when,
Right.
you know, so it's been hurry up and wait,
Yeah.
kind of like the youth risk behavior survey results, which, by the way, I did get an email, and they're gonna be out in July,
Oh, very good.
finally.
I think I actually had a report on my desk.
They're achieving early.
Yeah.
So this reciprocal nature, this is, I think it seemed to be, in my concern, the CTE standalones. Is that, and those supplemental instructions, that's where you could really, I mean, it becomes like Project Graduation exponentially exploded, right?
Right, and, right,
Yeah,
Where you can't, you know, you may not be able to have a section of English because you've got so many different proficiencies, in theory. I mean, I know that's an exaggeration,
Yeah.
but.
right. The only saving grace for me is that they're all so disparate right now that I don't feel like it's a non-starter for us.
Yeah.
My concern is that the systems diverge so much that we start putting up hurdles for kids so they can't come to career and tech ed centers because they have to stay at their sending school, because
Mhm.
that's the only way that they can meet their proficiencies.
Yeah.
So that's one thing, and I agree with you, the bigger issue is the standalones, but savvy principals will start looking at those embedded academic credits within the programs, every program having two, in two different subject areas,
Yeah.
As they should. And so that, CTE's been working for a long time to move away from embedded
Hmm.
Yeah.
towards integrated. So, I think we're the only center in the state that, at least half of our embedded credits are actually taught by, HQT
Yeah.
content area teachers
Yep.
in context of the program. So the English credit in design and creative media is taught by Tom Bisson.
Hmm.
The math credit in pre-tech is taught by one of two math teachers.
Which seems like a great direction.
It is a great direction. It's not, it's not sustainable to do it for every one of them because it's too expensive.
Yeah.
The perfect model would be to have teachers who both qualify to be a technical teacher and teach one of the two, if not both of the credits that are embedded, much like what middle school principals struggle with all the time, making sure they've got that right mix of
Right.
of content
Especially in small schools.
certified teachers, right,
Yeah.
exactly.
In the Westfords and the other smaller schools, that can become an absolute kind of
Nightmare.
dance.
Yeah, yeah. So the big first issue is the pullouts, and then the next issue is the embeddeds and integrateds.
I can't recall a time, and I can only speak for Essex High School shared students, I know you have a lot of other students to worry about, but, I mean, in terms of the integrated credits, I don't remember maybe one or two situations where there was even a discussion,
No,
but there's never been any disagreement. I mean, it's
That's
been
right.
pretty clear cut
Yeah.
from where we sit.
yeah.
So, yeah, in that spectrum of, you know, not too much, not enough kind of thing. So, it sounds like the scale, the methods, the standards of our grading, is now we've chosen how we're gonna split up our grade. We haven't really changed much about our grading practices, grading management, and so forth. That timeline is over the next 3 years to be looking at that? Next 2 years? This?
I'd like to say two, but
Yeah.
I just know how much else is on the plate within that time, but it has to be addressed.
And from my observations in the conversations, it hasn't been identified as an end, so much as what's the right grading scale, grading mechanism to match our new sort of way of teaching, as opposed to when will we switch to that. So,
Yeah.
there's been no kind of consensus that it's a 1 through 4, or that it's a 60 or 70. There's been lots of great conversation about it.
Well, and then as soon as you start about talking 1 through 4, it goes, well, should it be 1.5, 2, 2.5? And then you get into all different machinations where you're back up to a 13 or 14
Yeah.
point system,
Right.
not a
Just-
4 point, so,
There's, you know, we.
but it's
I
better than
think-
what we would have now.
I think I just want to respect the fact that there's been a high degree of energy probably over the last 5 years, and we know in the faculty it's been, you know, going back to I think it was it in the 80s where the changing of the grading scale, but because of the leadership or the decision making model, it wasn't unanimous, so it never changed.
Right.
That would be true back in the day.
So, I mean, there's been a high degree of energy. There's been an enormous degree of patience in saying, well, we've got some other changes, we're going to come into this. But the number of things like within the current grading scale where there's clear misunderstanding internally how to manage our grading scale so that, you know, the classic is the 10 points off if you hand in something late. And in a 7-point grading scale, it's a grade and a half.
Mhm.
But I think everyone thinks like, well, 10 points is a grade. You lose a grade if you hand it in late.
Smaller.
So like we don't even have that kind of allegiance to the 70 to 100. And the fact that you can get an F minus exponential with a 0, but you can't get 170 when you've done something perfect, but you can get a 0 when you haven't handed it in. Just has this, I mean, just on a mathematical basis, it is for every concern I've heard about that it's going to dumb us down or make us more mediocre, the system on a mathematical basis can just tell you that the engaged franchised are going to succeed mathematically. It's in their favor.
Right.
And those that miss or have mistakes are mathematically, it's charged against
Will
them.
they check out in October?
Well, when it takes 5 A's to bring back a 0,
I know.
We don't do zeros at the tech center. We've calculated that a 60 is an F, and it's gonna do damage to that's your 10-point scale.
yeah,
So we'll
Yeah.
place a 60 in there and move on.
yeah.
But a kid can't recover from a
Haven't.
0,
You
Yeah.
can't.
not
No.
unless you've got A's all the way.
Or a 50.
But you still
I
don't
mean,
recover.
Right,
Barely.
60
Yeah.
feels like the bottom end of.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why a lot of scales are 60 to 100.
That's right.
Yeah.
So there's just, you know, I guess it's one of those things. I mean, you deal with parents all the times as administrators. You're all parents, and you kind of been there and done this. But, you know, 2 years for a junior it's done. You know, you never get to. We don't want our kids to have 3 years as a sophomore. You know, we want them to be moving on. So these moments that it takes us to sort of, you know, again, it for me as chair, and I know that my time is now a definite for an end. I just feel like, you know, we're still finding. I find more acknowledgement that maybe we should be looking at some of these things. Than I find people saying, absolutely, we need to keep these zeros.
Yeah.
Absolutely, we need to have a varying extra credit per class or per sections or
Yeah.
in different. Absolutely, I mean, even just going back to the fact that the school just administratively decided this is the way for a final, this is the way for a midterm, which is my understanding is now that's universal, right? When a grade comes in as a final, it goes in, it doesn't get weighted to be 50% of the grade or 2% of the grade.
20%.
Yeah, but that's universal, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So regardless to what somebody wants to make their final, they can't make their final necessarily a make it or break it kind of situation. So we've had those universal like, nah, let's do it.
Mhm.
So just really encourage, you know, it would be great. I think that having a school board dedicated to a technical center and to a high school right now may be a benefit for these types of subjects.
Yeah.
Opposed to getting into a pre-K tech environment and the first couple of years of that governance model could mean a matter that you guys get ready and now they need to wait 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Right.
And now we're 3 generations
Yeah.
away from the decision to change the grading scale that didn't end up being unanimous, so it didn't go forward. You know, that's a long time.
Yeah. And
It's
it
a lot
already
of
has
kids.
been.
It's a lot of kids.
It's a
Yeah.
lot of kids, and you know that. I mean, it is clear evidence that maybe admissions into schools is not being impacted at all because admissions counselors have to figure out a huge variety of GPAs, but merit scholarships require a B. Plain and simple. There isn't one financial aid financial aid office in higher ed right now that's saying, "Oh, I bet that 275 is probably good enough. We'll give them some merit."
Yeah,
Because the demand is so high.
yeah.
If you don't have a 3.0, you're not going to get merit. And somebody at CVU and you are going to be proficient, and you could have the same numerical grade. I don't know.
So one strategy we could do, because I've only been here 5 years and I've heard it come up a couple times already. I remember sitting here with a different board chair. This
Well,
conversation.
I think I've been on the board now for, is it 5 years? 'Cause
About the same
It was
time.
definitely,
Yeah.
you were, this was
Right.
right when I started, so that was 5 years,
We
yeah.
could charge this, again, we're still making up the steering committee, but a steering committee made up of a perspective of students and parents and teachers on this, to charge them to examine, so what is the good representation of a grade and what should it look like? And while implementation may not be able to happen as quickly as next year.
Yeah.
It could, we could charge them with getting into that. Some of the work that Gusky presented to us really was challenging us to look at, is it a letter? Is it a number? Is it a 2-digit number? How big is the 2-digit number? And just spending time with the 3 middle school principals, Rob and a couple other folks, some high school teachers came down and listened. And sometimes you need those moments where you say, oh, yeah, what we've been doing, maybe we need to just talk about it a little bit more.
Yeah, I think.
And let go of history. I will say that the feedback from the students around the report card represented as great a variety as we heard from the parents.
Mm.
There were some students who kind of surprised me with wanting to hang on to.
Well, that, yeah,
additional things.
that's,
So-
but what if
But
it's not a
then-
number or not a letter, and what if it's a narrative? What if it's none of those things that, because if we're just transferring a number
So
for a
Greg-
letter,
Greg's
Well, and
question
it
would be,
gets-
what is the best
then-
way to represent student
exactly,
learning? And we could
exactly.
ask a broad group to look
Yeah.
at that.
And I think you were right, the school profile is one of the best ways to represent more of the totality of what the student may have learned or the rigor that they were under. For me, one of the greatest things that grounded me was to look at, the classic Google search, best private high schools in the country. And, these are the schools that nearly like 80% of their student body each year are graduating to go into, the very top universities in the world. And looking at their grading scales, it's all over the map.
Well, what are
Like
the other
1 through
variables there?
16,
Who
1
do they
through
know?
4,
Who- yeah.
decimals,
Yeah.
grades, numbers.
Yeah.
So that when all of a sudden it was like, there is no standards. I mean,
But-
that's Gusky.
Well,
The thing, though, is the filter is already applied for those schools.
Mhm.
They
'Cause you're
have
at
the
that
top
school.
10%.
Yeah, yeah.
They made
The-
big
the
decision.
rest of the
They can
middle
sort of
doesn't
do what
get-
they wanna do.
That's right.
So they can call it whatever
what-
they
they
want,
Yeah.
because
They
it's
can
all
do whatever they
relative.
want.
Yeah, yeah, it's been practically predetermined.
It's
Well, what-
predetermined, it's filtered, it's part of the filter.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing we
And it-
have talked about before, I know, is, and what came up at the 25th meeting was that, report cards are a communication tool. They're not your transcript. And when you're applying to a university or a college, they have a way to see what the rigor was and how you're being evaluated. That's different from the communication tool that comes home to your family. It allows that admissions person to compare you to somebody else who took a similar course. So one
Yeah.
thing we talked about before, Brian, I know, was the possibility of getting some admissions people here into our community and really talking about how that looks in different schools. Some, we have UVM right here, we have St. Mike's, we have some real local, but also regionally, we could benefit from having some people come, and maybe the steering committee might look at offering that to this community, a way of having them accessible to say, if we change this, it doesn't mean your child is not going to get into college. And one, again, getting back to the importance of what are grades for. And it helped. One thing that came up in my small group at the meeting on the 25th is, wow, there's a lot of isms around what grades are for. And I think we could benefit from opening our eyes to that and to really looking at what's underneath. Am I looking at my own child and my own desire for my child to go to a really high, best university in the world, or are we looking at public education and equity and accessibility for kids? So that conversation came up at my table. I think this community could benefit from having more of those conversations. And I think part of what will happen with this steering committee might be that, opening our eyes to some of the prejudices that we have.
And maybe some of the community engagement work, because I think this,
Right.
a lot of what came up at the high school was experiences at the middle level.
Yeah.
So it's a great opportunity to
Yeah.
bring those conversations to a broader K through 12 environment.
Mhm.
Well, great. I appreciate it, and I say that just with encouragement, not with pestering. I understand the bandwidth. There are so many changes going on, and then there's that thing of educating our community 179 days a year. So I totally appreciate it. I get it. It's just that sense of like, it's still there. I just want that to just be that, that bug that's flying around.
Yep.
Well, and I guess I want to say, while you're sitting here, I so appreciate the board's support in this work. It's difficult to move, to make it such a shift pedagogically and culturally within a building, while the eyes are all on us from outside the building. And you all have played a tremendous role in having empathy and understanding for the fragility of that type of work.
Well, it's all for the right reason.
Mm-hmm.
It's the future of our world. Great. With nothing else, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved. Then we are adjourned at 8:47.
7:47.
7:47.
Oh, my God.